It all started on a sunny Saturday morning. The kind of morning that should have been perfect for sipping coffee and enjoying some peace in my neighborhood. But instead, I was staring at my own driveway, seething. My carefully planned weekend was about to be ruined because HOA Karen, yes, that Karen had claimed my parking spot. Not borrowed, not temporarily used, but outright stolen, as if she had the authority to rewrite the neighborhood rules. And she didn't just stop. There she smirked, while doing it, a smug little grin that practically screamed, "I own this street." Now, I'm not someone who escalates conflicts easily. I usually mind my own business, nod politely at the HOA newsletters, and try to follow the rules. But this was different. This was personal. That spot wasn't just a convenience, it was a small part of my daily peace. The invisible line between calm mornings and chaos, and Karen had crossed it. As I watched her sashay down the street, in her perfectly polished SUV, I felt a strange mix of fury and disbelief. It wasn't just about the parking spot. It was about the principle, the audacity, the sheer nerve of someone thinking they could control my life 1 inch at a time. I could almost hear the HOA rules shaking in fear as she stomped all over them. I tried reasoning first. "Hey Karen, I think this is my spot," I said cautiously, approaching her as if diplomacy could work on someone like her. She laughed, a short, high-pitched sound that made my teeth clench. "Sorry, sweetie, finders keepers," she said, waving me off as though I were a pesky fly buzzing in her pristine neighborhood air. That was it. My patience had officially evaporated. I spent the next hour thinking, pacing in my garage, running through possibilities. I could call the HOA, but let's be honest, they were her allies. I could call the cops, but parking disputes didn't exactly qualify as emergencies. And then it hit me. Why fight her on her terms when I could rewrite the rules entirely? Why play by the HOA's rigid, suffocating rules, when creativity, audacity, and a little bit of mischief could deliver justice faster than any letter or legal complaint? By noon, the idea had taken shape. I would not only reclaim my spot, metaphorically I would make a statement. Something unforgettable. Something that would make Karen think twice before ever smirking at me again. Something big. Something toriel. Little did she know. By the end of the day, her perfectly manicured yard would be hosting the largest, loudest, and most inconvenient visitor imaginable. A tractor. And it wasn't just going to be parked. There was going to be a statement, a monument to audacity. After hours of pacing and brewing ideas, I finally knew exactly what I was going to do. This wasn't going to be a subtle protest or a quiet revenge. Had to be bold, almost theatrical. Karen had turned my simple parking spot into her personal throne, so the response had to match her level of audacity. I envisioned a tractor, the ultimate symbol of disruption in her pristine, rule-obsessed HOA world. The plan itself wasn't simple. First, I had to get the tractor. Luckily, I had a friend who ran a small farm on the outskirts of town and owed me a favor or two. I called him up, careful to keep the story vague. "Need a favor, urgent." "Very unusual," I said, letting my tone carry just enough tension to pique curiosity. Within an hour, he was on board, and by early afternoon, a small yet formidable tractor was rolling down the street toward my house, gleaming in the sunlight like a metallic sentinel ready for battle. Next came the logistics. Getting it into position without drawing attention required careful planning. Karen's house was just across the street from my driveway, and her yard was a showcase of HOA perfection manicured lawns, trimmed hedges, not a leaf out of place. I parked the tractor in my driveway, pretending it was just a temporary stop. Meanwhile, I studied the terrain like a general surveying a battlefield, noting every obstacle, the flower beds, the garden statues, even the tiny no parking signs she had planted as a personal challenge. As I revved the engine quietly, my mind raced. Would she notice? Would she call the HOA? Would she actually try to stop me? But there was no turning back now. The tractor wasn't just a vehicle, it was a declaration. It represented audacity, a refusal to be bullied, and the ultimate "you can't control me" message. Finally, the moment came. I rolled the tractor slowly across the street, inch by inch, towards her yard. The sound of the engine was like a drumbeat of inevitability. Birds scattered, neighbors peeked through curtains, and Karen predictably came out just in time to see the first wheel cross the threshold of her pristine lawn. Her jaw dropped, eyes wide with disbelief, hands frozen mid-air. "What are you?" she started, but the tractor kept moving, as if powered by my sheer determination and righteous indignation. By the time the tractor came to a stop, perfectly positioned in the middle of her flower beds, Karen was standing, like a statue, a mixture of fury and shock written across her face. Mission 1, total attention accomplished. Mission 2, humiliation imminent. The tractor wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was a spectacle, a story that would echo through the neighborhood for weeks. The reactions of the neighbors were priceless. Some stunned, some amused, some secretly cheering me on from behind curtains. And Karen, well, she was about to learn that revenge, when carefully executed, doesn't come in whispers, it comes in horsepower. Karen's reaction was everything I had imagined and then some. Her eyes bulged, her face a perfect portrait of disbelief and rage. She ran from her porch to the tractor, as if she could somehow will it to move with sheer frustration. But this wasn't just a tractor in her yard. It was a statement she couldn't ignore, a rebellion she couldn't suppress, and a spectacle the entire neighborhood couldn't miss. Neighbors began gathering, peeking from windows and porches, their expressions a mix of shock, amusement, and curiosity. A few brave souls even stepped onto their lawns, whispering among themselves, some secretly filming. Word spreads fast in small HOA communities, and within minutes it felt like the entire block had become a front-row audience to my audacious stunt. The usual quiet of Saturday mornings was replaced with murmurs, gasps, and even laughter. Karen, of course, wasn't thinking about optics, she was thinking about control. "You can't just, this is my yard. I'll call the HOA, I'll call the police," she shrieked, waving her arms like a conductor of chaos. But the tractor was immovable. It wasn't going anywhere, and that realization only seemed to fuel her panic. Every siren of authority she invoked sounded hollow, because the law couldn't dictate audacity in the same way it dictated parking spaces. At that moment, I stepped out onto my porch, trying to look calm, casual even, as if the whole event were perfectly normal. I called out to her, "You might want to consider this a temporary installation, Karen. Art, really, neighborhood sculpture." Very bold statement. My attempt at humor did little to calm her, but it drew even more attention from the spectators. Phones were recording, neighbors were whispering, and in a way, I felt a small sense of poetic justice. Karen's shouting escalated. She ran to her phone, probably to text the HOA, and I could see the fire in her eyes. This was no longer about a parking spot. It had become a battle for dominance, a struggle between rigid rules and audacious rebellion. And every second, her frustration mounted, her composure unraveling like a thread pulled too tight. Meanwhile, some of the neighbors, finally daring to break their silence, began approaching her cautiously, offering sly comments like, "Looks like the tractor suits your yard," or "That's one way to make a statement." Karen ignored them, but the damage was done. Her perfect image, her control over the street, and her aura of untouchable authority were cracking right there in the sunlight. And just when I thought I could finally relax, the tractor's engine sputtered, as if on cue, drawing Karen's full attention back to the intruder in her yard. Little did she know, this was only the beginning. There was one final element I had planned, something that would ensure the story of this Saturday and the tractor would live in neighborhood legend forever. By now, the scene in the neighborhood was absolute chaos. Karen was pacing, phone in hand, calling the HOA local authorities, and probably anyone she could think of to enforce order. Her voice carried across the street, cracking with a mix of fury and desperation. Meanwhile, the tractor sat immobile in her yard, gleaming like a monument to rebellion, as if mocking her very existence. Every inch of her pristine lawn was now hostage to my audacious stunt. Neighbors had completely lost their composure. They were openly laughing, taking photos, and sharing the unfolding drama in real time. One elderly man from 2 houses down shouted, "I've seen everything in this neighborhood, but this. This is art." Another neighbor, barely holding back laughter, whispered to his wife. Finally, someone stood up to her. I could almost hear the collective relief in the street. A community secretly celebrating the audacity of one resident willing to challenge the Karen authority. Karen, however, was not amused. She stormed around the yard like a general preparing for battle, shouting rules and regulations, citing obscure sections of the HOA handbook, demanding that the tractor be removed immediately. But here's the thing about rules: they mean nothing when the spectacle is already in motion, when attention has shifted, and when the narrative is no longer hers to control. She had created a monster of her own making. Then came the crowning moment of chaos. The HOA representative arrived, car tires crunching on gravel, clipboard in hand. Karen rushed over, waving her arms like a conductor, explaining everything in rapid-fire sentences. The representative blinked, taking in the tractor, the onlookers, the chaos, and the sheer audacity of it all. After a tense moment of silence, he simply said, "Well, this is unprecedented." Karen's face went from hope to horror. Unprecedented meant no rules applied, no penalties were predefined, and most importantly, there was no immediate power she could wield to undo it. At that moment, I stepped closer, casually leaning against the porch railing, enjoying the theater I had created. Unprecedented, indeed, I murmured, just loud enough for neighbors and Karen to hear. But sometimes, unprecedented events are the best lessons. Karen's jaw clenched. Her fury was tangible, but the tractor had already done its job: humiliation, spectacle, and complete control shift. By the time the HOA representative left, shaking his head, and Karen retreated inside her house, the street buzzed with excitement and whispered conversations. The tractor wasn't just a machine in her yard. It was a symbol, a message, a story that would be retold at barbecues, block parties, and HOA meetings for years to come. But the story didn't end there. There was one final, unforgettable twist, something that would cement this Saturday as legendary in neighborhood history. Something that would make Karen realize that meddling with parking spots wasn't just risky, it could backfire spectacularly. After the initial chaos had settled, I knew the tractor had done its job in terms of spectacle, humiliation, and sending a message. But Karen's defeat wouldn't be complete without a final twist, a moment that would make this Saturday unforgettable for her, the neighborhood, and yes, for history itself. It wasn't just about parking spots anymore. It was about narrative control, and I intended to write the ending in bold letters. I spent a few minutes inside my garage, casually sipping a soda, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. Meanwhile, I kept an eye on Karen's house. She was pacing near the window, phone glued to her ear, probably detailing the horrific tragedy to anyone who would listen. That's when I put the finishing touch into motion. I had prepared a simple but dramatic prop: a string of colorful flags attached to the tractor, waving in the wind. Each flag read a word, forming a cheeky message that everyone on the street could see. When I revealed them, it read, "Finders Keepers, HOA Queen." I rolled the tractor slightly forward, angling it so the message was visible from every house along the block. The reaction was instantaneous. Laughter erupted. Phones whipped out. Karen froze in her doorway, stunned, speechless. For one saw an achievement I had waited years to witness. The street buzzed with excitement. Neighbors came out, applauding and cheering, as if the tractor and its cheeky message had become the centerpiece of a new community tradition. Some of the braver residents even took selfies in front of it, immortalizing the moment. Karen tried to respond, yelling from behind her glass doors, but the message was clear. The street had taken sides, and her authority was thoroughly diminished. She realized, perhaps too late, that her petty attempts at control had not only failed, but had provided everyone else with the story of the year. Even the HOA, reluctantly, seemed to recognize that any punishment or reprimand would look ridiculous in the face of such boldness. By sunset, the chaos had mellowed into a neighborhood legend. The tractor remained a humorous monument, while Karen retreated indoors, nursing her ego. For me, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming dignity, asserting boundaries, and proving that sometimes you have to fight absurdity with audacity. Later, as the street returned to its usual quiet, I took one last look at the tractor, now bathed in golden light, and smiled. Karen had learned a lesson in the most unforgettable way possible. Never underestimate creativity, humor, and the sheer will to stand your ground. That tractor wasn't just a vehicle, it was justice on four wheels. A story that would live on in HOA lore forever. And that, my friends, is how a stolen parking spot turned into a legendary neighborhood spectacle. Sometimes the best revenge isn't quiet, it's bold, hilarious, and completely unforgettable. Enjoying this wild HOA showdown? Hit that subscribe button to catch more jaw-dropping neighborhood stories. If this tractor revenge had you laughing or shocked, give it a like and drop a comment below. What would you do if someone stole your parking spot?